Well, welcome everybody to today's session of Talking Everything Bible. Glad you were able to join us. And we are today in chapter 5 of the first book of Samuel. Chapter 5 is a rather short chapter, but has got a lot in it. So going to be fun. All right. Before we get started, I've asked Tim to give us a quick rundown of chapter 4. Go ahead, Tim.
All right. First Samuel chapter 4. Well, the Israelites have a big problem known as the Philistines, and they go into a battle with the Philistines, and they lose. And so while they're licking their wounds, they go back to their camp, and they've gone into battle without the use of the ark, and so they have this bright idea to go back to Shiloh to bring the ark to the battlefield, so maybe they will win against the Philistines. So they send away for it, and they bring the ark in, and at first the Israelites are very confident because they have the ark, and the Philistines are kind of afraid because they know that they have the ark. But when they go into battle, the ark is not helpful for the Israelites to win, and the Israelites are defeated, and the ark is captured. Also, Eli's two sons, who were to bring the ark to the battlefield, are killed, and which is a prophecy that was given to Samuel earlier, which was fulfilled. So from that, a messenger from the battlefield returns to Eli to tell him that the Philistines have got the ark, and that that Eli's sons have died. And because of this news, Eli, who's very old at this point, falls back off of his chair, breaking his neck, and he dies there, which was also prophesied as well. And then it continues. The last part of it is Eli's daughter-in-law, who was Phinehas's wife and was pregnant, and she was giving birth to a child, and she heard that the ark was captured, and she dies in childbirth. But the child survives, and she names him Ichabod. So that's where we are at the end of chapter 4.
Thank you. All right. So as an introduction to chapter 5, thinking themselves to have the ark and situation well in hand, the Philistines soon begin to discover just how very difficult handling this cult symbol of the Lord's presence can be. As the episode develops, it becomes obvious that the ark has lost none of its weight in traveling from Israel to Philistia. The heavy hand of the Lord soon begins to make itself known. First on the chief god of the Philistine pantheon, and then on the Philistines themselves. The Philistines do not immediately associate their trials with their captive ark, and try to find a more natural explanation of their difficulties. But soon the result of their experiments seems sufficiently clear that other Philistine cities resist continual experimentation of their own predicaments. All right. So let's read 1 Samuel 5, verses 1 through 6. Yolanda.
Okay. After the Philistines captured the ark of God, they took it from the battleground of Ebenezer to the town of Ashdod. They carried the ark of God into the temple of Dagon and placed it beside an idol of Dagon. But when the citizens of Ashdod went to see it the next morning, Dagon had fallen with his face to the ground in front of the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him in his place again. But the next morning, the same thing happened. Dagon had fallen face down before the ark of the Lord again. This time his head and hands had broken off and were lying in the doorway. Only the trunk of his body was left intact. That is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor anyone who enters the temple of Dagon in Ashdod will step on its threshold. Then the Lord's heavy hand struck the people of Ashdod and the nearby villages with a plague of tumors. And there's a note here that says the Greek version and Latin Vulgate read tumors, and rats appeared in their land, and death and destruction were throughout the city.
After chapter 4's focus on the disastrous results of Israel's attempts to take the ark in hand and bring it into battle, 1 Samuel 5 turns to consider the Philistines. Now it is the Philistines' turn to handle the ark. Twice we read that the Philistines took the ark and brought it first to the coastal city of Ashdod, and then right into the temple of their chief god, Dagon. The Philistines were encouraged by their victory over the Israelites to assume that Dagon was more powerful than Yahweh. They were quickly disabused of this assumption. Arising early the next day after depositing the ark beside Dagon, they discovered Dagon's fallen on his face on the ground before the Lord. This spectacle does not immediately bring the Philistines to their knees, however. They doubtlessly knew from experience what today's seismologists know very well, namely that the shaking of the ground in their region was not that unusual. The Philistines had thought their God to have the upper hand over Israel, but now find him both headless and handless, and they themselves will soon be feeling it in their own bodies before the heavy hand of Yahweh. The statue doesn't just get broken, it falls so it's lower than the ark. Did you catch that? It's like it's going to be beneath God. They rebuild it and it does it again. And it, at first they put it down to an earthquake, but I'm sure they're figuring out after the second time, and no one else has felt the ground shake. That was an awful localized earthquake, huh? just in that room. Yeah. So
yeah, I think it's noteworthy that he's not just below the ark, but it says it had fallen with its face to the ground in front of the ark of the Lord. So just like
I picture this, and it's kind of because God is he knows what he's going to do, but he kind of starts it in let me see how smart they are here, because in reality, as soon as they walked into the room, they should have gotten a clue here, but because they knew the ark represented God, but like it said, they looked at it from their viewpoint. They looked at it as much of an idol as their God was. It was just another statue, or like the writer says, a cult symbol. So of their religion, this is from their point of view. He's giving this from their point of view. It's just another version of an idol to the Israelites' gods. But they're soon finding out that there's a whole lot more to that. Before proceeding to recount the further adventures of the ark, the narrator breaks frame to describe a customary behavior that continues to his own day. To this day, neither the priests of Dagon or any other entering the temple of Ashdod step on the threshold. Whether this notice is meant to convey information regarding the origin of the Philistine practice, or, as it seems more likely, to associate an existing practice with a humiliating defeat, remains an open question. And of course, they don't mean today. They mean to the day of the writer writing this is what this is referring to. And by the way, just to remind you, this may have been written as late as in Solomon's days. So that's why he's saying that. Okay.
What was noteworthy to me, the wording of this Dagon statue. He fell on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. I mean, the symbolism there is so strong. In front of the ark, thank you, on your face. And, it was very strong in symbolism.
Yeah, and then they go, of course, they go and they put it back together all in one day, according to the description here. They put it, so in that case, I kind of it would make more sense that it was probably more likely to be wooden than stone, because for them to have put it together in one day, that would have been unlikely if it was stone. But so they put it back, and then the next day, it's like not only is it back down, smashed on its face with with his head knocked off, but then with his hand and his feet knocked off. It's like, okay, didn't get it the first time, let's see if you get it the second time. And and they still try to justify it. And then of course, then the people, the town begins to start to suffer. Yeah. Ezra.
Also, I was looking Dagon up. He's not just the god of the Philistines. He's basically the god of the Western Mesopotamia, and he's known as the god of gods in that area. So it's not some low-level gods in their opinion.
Yeah. So this is, God is definitely taking him down a notch here. Yeah. All right, Ezra, go ahead and read verses 7 through 12, please.
Okay. When the men of Ashdod saw that it was so, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, because his hand is severe on us and on Dagon our God." So they sent word and gathered all the governors of the Philistines to them and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" And they said, "Have the ark of the God of Israel brought to Gath." So they took the ark of the God of Israel away. After they had taken it away, the hand of the Lord was against the city, creating a very great panic, and he struck the people of the city, from the young to the old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron, and the ark of God came to Ekron, and the Ekronites cried out, saying, "They have brought the ark of God of Israel to us, to kill us and our people." Therefore they sent word and gathered all the governors of the Philistines and said, "Send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it return to its own place, so that it will not kill us and our people." For there was a deadly panic throughout the city. The hand of God was very heavy there. And the people who did not die were struck with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven.
The humiliation of the god Dagon was now complete. Attention turns to the Philistines themselves. The Lord's hand is heavy on the people of Ashdod and the vicinity, and the painful evidence is an outbreak of tumors. The precise nature of these tumors is unclear. In the Hebrew language, in the Hebrew text, this is much more detailed than in the English or Greek translation. I think that's the note you read, Yolanda, on thing. This was actually a plague. This was the literal translation is a plague that, and historians think it could very well what was more like bubonic plague, because it mentions rats and stuff. So yeah, they were very, very serious. The people of Ashdod quickly conclude that they cannot keep the Ark of God of Israel in their city because both they and their god Dagon are feeling the weight of the hand. So it's interesting to me. So this city is starting to figure out the connection between the Ark and their plight. And so what do? It's like, Alameda is undergoing a plague, and they figure out, it's a certain object. Instead of getting rid of it altogether, they go, let's give it to Walnut Creek.
And Walnut Creek is like,
So they basically pass the buck, and they send it to the next city. They are no more capable of manipulating the ark to their advantage than were the Israelites in the preceding chapter. In fact, its mere presence amongst them is crushing them. While the Israelites had sent to Shiloh for the ark, the Philistines now send it to the rulers of the Philistines, probably the 5 rulers of the so-called Philistine Pentapolis, to plan how to be rid of the ark. The plan suggested either by the rulers themselves or by the people of Gath is that the ark should be moved to Gath. This plan suggests that the Philistines are not yet fully convinced as to the cause of their severe and diverse difficulty. By the way, Gath lay some 11 miles east of Ashdod. So this wasn't very far away. Okay, 11 miles. That's San Leandro to Alameda, by the way. That's exactly 11 miles. But Gath, the reason they send it to Gath here becomes a little bit more clear. It's their leaders, the Philistine leaders, or their headquarters or the capital, whatever you want to call it, was Gath. So it was actually the people of Gath and the leaders that decided, yeah, bring it here. Let's try to figure this out. So it wasn't like Ashdod send it there. It turns out that they actually came up with a plan to bring it to Gath. So that, and then of course that now they get the consequences of it. By removing the ark from the port city of Ashdod to the more inland location, the Philistine may have hoped to test the theory that their woes had nothing to do with the ark they had captured, but rather with the fact that the pestilence often breaks out in port cities.
I find it kind of ironic that the god of Dagon, went the second time that it went down, the hands were gone. So that god was left totally immobile. And it's the hand of God, though, that comes and delivers the tumors and the plagues and the things that happen to the cities that they brought the ark to. So it's as though God's taking away the authority and the power and taking it out of the hands of Dagon and showing the might and the power of his own hands.
What if they had respected the ark as the symbol of God? Do you think God would have taken it more easy on them?
I think it was the same as Pharaoh, and God would have hardened their hearts so that he can show who he is to them, and all these plagues is just God's way of like, I'm real. Your God says nothing. It's like ants, if you will. It's dust. God really wanted to show who he is to them, and even that to Israel, that he himself, he alone annihilated, if you will, the enemy, just with the presence of this iconic thing, if you will. You know.
Yeah, I agree with Ezra. I don't think that the Lord would have been any easier on them. I think that this whole situation was as much for Israel as it was for the Philistines. And so I think he was letting them know, when I said no gods before me, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, and we will see that in chapter 6. Yeah, that will come to light in chapter 6. All right. Okay. No longer so concerned to test their natural the natural explanation hypothesis, the Gittites simply want to be rid of the ark, and they send it on to Akron, which is just 5 miles north of Gath. The people of Akron have been paying attention to the events of Ashdod and Gath, and the arrival of the ark induces immediate panic. For a second time, the rulers of the Philistines are sent for, but this time it's not a request to counsel, but to issue a directive. Send the ark of God to Israel away. Let it go back to its own people, or its God Yahweh will kill us and all our people. Which is, if they had not returned it to Israel, I would not be surprised that would have happened. Yeah. The weight of God's hand is mentioned yet again in verse 11, but here the intensifier very is added. God's hand was very heavy against Akron. Not surprisingly, deadly panic or panic of death is the result. The dramatic irony of the events of 1 Samuel 5 is hard to miss. The Philistines thought at the end of the battle of chapter 4 that the Israelites' loss was their gain. They were soon to learn a very bitter lesson. Far from being their captive, the ark of God quickly and relentlessly began bringing them to their knees, if not to their graves. It was not the ark, of course, that had this effect. For if 1 Samuel 4 and 5 teaches anything about the ark, it is that it is not the object itself, that it is the source of the power. That is the source of the power, but rather the God whom the ark represents. It is the Lord's hand that weighs heavily upon the citizen of Ashdod and Gath, and very heavily upon Ekron. It is the power that puts Dagon to his face, depriving him in the second round of the battle of both head and hands. If it was customary for conquerors to go on a victory tour of their newly conquered city, it's hard to see the travels of the ark as anything less.
So you were mentioning about, when they conquer something or a victory, they would parade the trophy, right? I could just imagine if the Philistines did this with the ark. They were parading the ark as booty, basically. I'm like, man, what if everyone that looked at the ark just fell dead? I mean, we're gonna see that in 6 with the Israelites, but man, it's almost like it's something that cannot happen, that if they did look at the ark as a conquest, they'd be struck dead, like they'd be wiped out if they did do it as a parade, man.
Yeah, in a little bit of a preview, it's interesting that the Philistines learn not just to return the ark, but how to properly return it. They learn how to handle it, how to carry it, how to do in order to respect God. They did learn a lesson here. And when they return it to Israel, then Israel just doesn't get it. But spoiler alert, I don't want to spoil chapter 6. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's chapter 5. And in chapter 6, the Israelites get the ark back, and we'll see what happens then. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, and good to have you, and we'll see you next week.